Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. You heard, my name's Hank Weisinger. I'm a psychologist. I'm very happy to be here, and I think the subject matter that we are going to be speaking about will have great application in work, but I will tell you even more importantly, as a clinician in your personal lives. How many have kids living at home? Okay. For those of you who have children at home, before you go to bed tonight, you will be able to apply what we are going to be speaking about. I do want to make a little comment because you did hear the reference to anger management. I was in the movie. I had written a book called Anger at Work. I am in the scene right behind home plate. To tell you the truth, they wanted me to play Jack's part, but he did it for less money. My daughter is in the scene as well, standing right behind Woody Harrelson. I would tell all of you, if you get I have much more presence in the deleted scenes on the DVD. Emotional intelligence. My agenda is to give you a 5-minute wrap on emotional intelligence, a little rant, and then I want to get into some very specific ways of how you can bring the concept of emotional intelligence to life, whether it is in your relationships with each other, whether it is in your relationships at home, or with your clients. And in the back of your mind, so we can have some data to work for, I want you to ask yourself very quickly, what are the 3 most prevalent emotions that you experience during the course of a working day? What are the 3 emotions that you experience? Now, to give you a heads up, if you have to think about it, that is not a good sign, because that tells me you are really clueless to what your emotional landscape is. How are you when you go into your house, when you get home, 5:30, 6 o'clock? What is your mood? That is probably the dominant mood that you had for the day. If you are like most people in corporate America, I would actually bet that I know the emotions you're going to write down. And I would say the first emotion that comes to everybody's mind is frustration. How many people had frustration out there? Okay, and let me give you a tip. If you're experiencing a lot of frustration, whatever you're doing isn't working. That's why you're frustrated. Then it is very interesting because after people write down frustration, then they tend to write down enthusiasm. Now, as a psychologist, I will say that frustration tends to have a negative connotation in corporate America. Oh, if you're frustrated, we think that's troublesome because people don't understand it. So therefore, people immediately have to put down something positive. So they say they're enthusiastic. And then the next emotion they tend to write down is anxiety. It's very difficult as a psychologist. You're telling me frustration and anxiety, but yet there is enthusiasm. And I always like to ask people, what lasts longer? Do you stay enthusiastic longer or do you stay frustrated? And the answer is obviously frustration. I've known many people in clinical situations who spend their entire life being frustrated, angry, depressed. With enthusiasm, it's a little different. Like if you're a Red Sox fan, the Red Sox win the World Series, you get happy, you get excited, and then 2 days later, so what? And it goes away. So as you are writing these emotions down, keep them in the back of your mind, because I want you to start asking yourself, how do you manage them? What are your emotional management strategies? And more importantly, what do they tell you about yourself, about your own life? And if you're not experiencing enthusiasm, then the question will become, how do you create enthusiasm within yourself, within your department, with the people you work with? So, and I will walk you through the handouts. I'm not really a handout guy. So we'll be all over the place, but I do want you to know electronically you can get a copy of the handouts because it'll be a very good reference tool, and more importantly, and I'll walk you through it, there will be a blueprint for applying your emotional intelligence which will help you integrate the concepts that I'm going to be addressing into your own personal life. The most important concept is what I call taking action, and it's a problem for most people. See, the reality is, as I'm just speaking, all that is insight. Who cares? Doesn't do anything. From my therapy days, when I lived in LA, I did a lot of therapy. First of all, if you live in LA, you have to do therapy. But I I was licensed to do it. And I would see people, they'd come to my office, excuse the language, they'd be screwing up their lives and they didn't know why. And I would always call this group unconsciously incompetent. They're lousing up their lives, they don't know why. Now, after a few sessions of therapy, they develop insight. Now, they are consciously incompetent. They're lousing up their lives, they know why, but nothing has changed. And nothing has changed. I've seen this over and over and over because the people did not want to do it. I have given thousands of presentations to corporate America. Everybody takes notes, in a full-day seminar, and then that's it. And then they put it in their drawer, and they do not implement. You cannot take a Jane Fonda home video, stick it in a video machine, lie in bed, watch it, expect to lose weight. You need to do it. So I'm going to give you many take actions, and that's what the blueprint does. It forces you to develop your emotional intelligence. Now, let me quickly start out by giving you an idea of what emotional intelligence is and some characteristics about emotions. When we say emotional intelligence, what that really means is different types of intelligence. And one type of intelligence, and I certainly would say if you are an actuary, you're going to be high on what we call cognitive and mathematical intelligence. Verbal skills. If I were to say to all of you, how is an orange and a banana alike? You would all say, both fruit. Then the next question might be, how's a table and a chair alike? Both furniture. Now, as you go up the hierarchy, the last question is, how is a fly and a tree alike? At which point you would say they're both living organisms. Now, those are your verbal reasoning skills. Mathematical reasoning skills. It takes 6 men to do a job in 3 days. How many men does it take to do the same job in a half a day if each man works 6 hours? Now, without SAT tutoring, forget that. But that would be your mathematical skills. Now, here is the only important point about your intelligence. And as I say this because it applies to all of you, please look around very quickly at all of your colleagues. Just take a look. And as you're looking at them, and as they are looking at you, I want all of you to know that from this point on, there is not one person in this room who will become more intelligent. Your intelligence has maxed out. In fact, the truth is, as I look at some of you, it's only a matter before that IQ starts to go south. Do not confuse more knowledge with becoming more intelligent. You could learn 5,000 new vocabulary words. Great, your verbal reasoning skills are still the same. And it's the same thing with learning to do the new math problem. Your mathematical skills are still the same. When my son went to college years ago, he acts like he's still in college, but as he went years ago, I will tell you that I was smarter than all of his friends who went to school. But his 3 friends who went to MIT were much more intelligent. So given the fact that your cognitive intelligence is not going to develop, what gives you the edge? What separates you by more than 6 degrees from a person sitting next to you? It's not your intellect, because I say that everybody in the room is basically the same. Everybody who goes to Harvard or Yale or Princeton is smart. But once you're in, everybody is the same. That's where the concept of emotional intelligence starts to come into play. There are a lot of people who will say, well, emotional intelligence is more important than cognitive intelligence. That is not true. That is not true. However, your rational intelligence, at best, 10% of your success. 10%. That means there's 90% out there that is unaccounted for. 90%. Even if what we're talking about is another 10%, that is huge because it's never been developed. I take the position that nobody in this room has ever had their emotional intelligence formally developed. How many of you, when you were in high school, show of hands, had a course in English? Everybody. How many of you had a class in self-awareness? Nobody. How many of you had a class in math? Everybody. How many had a class in managing your emotions? Nobody. Now you tell me, when was the last time somebody came up to you at work and said, who the hell was that general in the French Revolution? You don't need that information. But that's what you studied. Name the capitals of all the states. What ridiculous type of information. Didn't Paul Simon say in that song, when I think back of all the, in quotes, crap I learned in high school? Now we know he was exactly right. Emotional intelligence gives you an edge because you have not developed it. And that's why I'm going to spend the majority of my time telling you how you can develop your emotional intelligence. 4 quick points about emotions. One, they're universal. Everybody in the room has the same emotions. I saw your world chart. Believe me, your colleagues in Shanghai have exactly the same emotions that you have here in New Jersey. The same thing with your clients. It doesn't matter whether somebody is struck by an earthquake in South America or somebody in LA. It is the same emotions. What I have learned as a psychologist is even though we have the same emotions, we express them very differently. For example, how Jack expresses anger can be very different than how Jane expresses anger, but they both have to do it. There are family differences. How one family deals with anger is different than how another family deals with anger, but they both deal with it. There are organizational differences. Trust me on this point. How a company like IBM deals with an angry employee is totally different than how a company like Merrill Lynch deals with the same individual, but they both have to deal with it. There are cultural differences. A Japanese woman, for example, expresses anger at her mother-in-law by having an imperfect floral arrangement on the table. In America, they throw the flowers at the mother-in-law. They do. The point is, they both have to deal. So that's the first point. Emotions are universal. 2, and this is why I am here. You cannot get away from this point. Emotions impact performance. Emotions impact performance. There are some emotions called swing emotions. Anger and anxiety, that can go both ways. I'm a big sports fan. I've seen hundreds of times of my favorite athletes, teams, they mismanage anger, derails them. Next thing, the game is lost. Spiking a football because you don't get a first down like John Elway did in a Super Bowl and penalize his team does not help. When a basketball player gets a technical foul because they're not managing their emotions, does not help. It makes the situation worse. On the other hand, I'm going to show them you can use anger as a motivator to harness that arousal, convert it into energy. Anxiety is the same way. Anxiety can derail you or it can motivate you. When my daughter was in high school and studying for a history test, she thinks she's ready. I know she isn't. I would deliberately increase her anxiety, which is the same strategy I would use if I had some arrogant young guy thinks he knows everything. I'm going to increase his or her anxiety. And the way I did that with my daughter, I would ask her questions that she didn't know. Understand what anxiety means, uncertainty. That is why when there is a hurricane, a disaster, and I'm a homeowner, one of my primary emotions is I am getting anxious. I am uncertain. What is going to happen to me? Is this going to be covered? That is why, in terms of customer service, I want you to remember that one of your first tactics dealing with a person who is thrown in a disaster claim is to reduce their anxiety by giving them information and giving them reassurance. So you can make anger and anxiety work both ways. There are other emotions that always bring out the worst. Depression, dejection, disappointment. Nobody in this room can tell me that you can perform well when you are feeling down. This is why it's so important to create optimism. Optimism is the antithesis of depression. Optimism is positive thoughts and feelings about the future. How many times have you heard when President Obama gives a speech, first thing he starts to do is spin optimism towards the future? I'll give you a personal example because my mother at the time, she was like 88 years old, living in an assisted living home. And I would get phone calls. This is a woman who has traveled the world 3 times over. Those days are gone. So I would get phone calls, not an exaggeration, every single day. Hank, I hate it here. I can't live here. It's terrible. I don't want to die here. And I'm thinking, not just as their son, but as a psychologist, I have to help her out. I made her optimistic. I'll tell you how I did it. How many of you, I hope all of you, saw the movie about Schmidt with Jack Nicholson? Because if you haven't seen it, Jack plays an actuary. And at the beginning of the movie, his wife dies. So he gets the actuary book, and he looks up statistically how many years does he have left. And then that becomes the theme of the film, how he wants to spend those remaining years. This is what I did with my mother. I called her up. I said, Mom, I got great news for you. She said, good news? What is it? What is it? I said, well, I looked up in the book. You only have 3 more years. Oh, I can make it. She got so excited because she knew she was out of there in 3 years. I made her optimistic. And there are some emotions that always enhance your success, always. And this is what is being referred to as the new psychological capital. Confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. That is it. That's how you want to be. Those attributes give you tremendous advantages, not just at work, but in life. So you need to be thinking, how can I, if you have kids, how can I make them confident? How can I make them optimistic? How can I make them tenacious? How can I make them enthusiastic? So that's the second point. Emotions, for better or for worse, impact your behavior. What emotional intelligence is, to leverage that point. Look at the emotions you wrote down, to use those emotions to work for you rather than against you. Third key point is that all emotions, including anger, intrinsically are good. Counterintuitive. We think, when I had written a book on anger, it was the biggest mistake I ever made because nobody wanted to buy it. I'd go up to a person in the airport, sir, I thought you'd like a new copy of my book, Anger at Work. Do I look like an angry person? Had a negative connotation. I'm serious. This is the joke that my friends and that I would share with them. I'll call up a company. I'd like to talk to your managers about managing anger. No, forget it. Nobody's angry here, and don't you ever call us again. That's what they'd say. Seriously. Now, 6 months later, I call up the same person, same organization. I'd like to talk to your managers about emotional intelligence. Ooh, yeah, that's good. It's like emotional intelligence good, anger bad. And that's because, and I didn't even understand it at the time, people do not understand the emotion. What does anger communicate? When one of your friends is angry, what's the first thing you ask him or her? Most likely it's what's wrong. Now you know the function of anger. It is a cue that something is wrong. What idiot organizations do is they make believe nobody's angry. If I am a CEO, I want to know what makes you angry because all that means is you think this is wrong. When I am a customer and I'm angry because I've been on the phone for 40 minutes, that's what I'm angry about. I am waiting for 40 minutes to talk to somebody. I have found one of the most useless things that somebody in customer service can say is, I'm sorry, I really apologize. I always tell the person, you know what, save that for the guy in back of me. I don't want an apology, I just want service. So how do you respond to an angry person? If you know that if somebody is angry, the best thing always to say to an angry person is tell me what's wrong. Because they're going to tell you what's wrong anyway. So use that to work for you. Anxiety tells you that you are uncertain. Enthusiasm tells you that you are excited. Dejection, depression tells you that you have no hope. Optimism, when you say you're optimistic, it means that you expect positive things to happen. So this third point is that anytime you experience an emotion, I want you to start thinking, what does the emotion tell me? And once you know the message of the emotion, then you can start to respond more effectively. And all emotions, is the fourth point in psychology, work the same. Think of like when you get angry. Your thoughts. How you talk to yourself when you are angry is very different than how you talk to yourself when you are happy. The problem is most people are not aware of how they talk to themselves. Physically is the second component of all emotions. What happens to your body? How do you know physically when you are anxious or when you are angry or when you are getting defensive? If somebody is criticizing me, the faster I recognize that I am becoming defensive, the faster sit back, listen to what the person is saying. He or she is trying to help me. Most of us are not thinking those thoughts when you are getting defensive. And the third component of all emotions, visualize it like a triangle. Thoughts on one corner, physical arousal on another, and behavior, your actions. Again, using anger. The last time you got angry, what did you do? Did it help or did it make the situation worse? The last time you got into an argument with your partner, what did you do? When you say, I don't want to talk to you and walk out of the room for 10 hours, that clearly is not helping. What are your thoughts when you were angry? I guarantee the last time you got into an argument, whether it was with your partner, whether it was with your boss or your coworkers, and you walked out of the room, I bet my life on it, you were not thinking, they got a lot of wonderful things about them. You were basically thinking all negative. And therefore, as a quick tip, anytime you get angry at somebody, anytime, immediately think of something positive about them because it prevents your thoughts from escalating in a negative way. Now, we have this concept of emotional intelligence, and what I hate about it is that it's turned into a business. If you do a Google, you will see millions of references. And everybody says, well, here are the 30 factors of being emotionally intelligent. Other people will say, here are the 12, here are 8. I don't know where these numbers come from, but I do know where my 5 numbers come from. The theory of emotional intelligence was created by 2 psychologists, Peter Salve, who is the new president of Yale University, who has made one of his missions to create a more emotionally intelligent university community, and John Mayer at the University of New Hampshire. And my work is based on an application of the theory of emotional intelligence, which translated means that there are going to be 5 key factors. Now, to work backwards, I will say that those people who are high on these 5 factors are the most successful people in life. There's just tons of research. The first is high self-awareness. What high self-awareness means is that you're tuned in to how you think, how you feel, how your behavior impacts others 24/7. I don't want everybody to have just self-awareness. I'm talking about high self-awareness, because when you don't have high self-awareness, you get yourself in trouble. You lose your boundaries. Think of high self-awareness as having a compass. It's an internal navigational system. Your kids would use the phrase clueless. And that's what clueless really means, is that you have no awareness of how you are approaching other people. One of the concepts of why self-awareness is so important is, remember that it is through your own perceptions of the world that everybody in the room, including myself, of course, that we decide, are you the hero, the villain, or the victim? Have you ever noticed that some of your friends, when they spin a story, they're always the hero? Some people are always the bad guy. Some people are always the victim. They always put themselves in a victim role. But how do you know your perceptions of life are accurate? Because a lot of people confuse the data with their interpretation. Meaning that if I see my boss walk down the hallway, that's the data. And if he or she doesn't say hello to me, that's my interpretation. So I said, why did my boss say hello to me? Oh, I know, they're pissed off at me. Fine, I won't talk to them either. The reality is your boss is running to the bathroom. They're not stopping for anybody. This has nothing to do with you. So one of the things that you have to start gaining awareness is differentiating between what you see and your interpretation of it. If you are talking to me, and just because I'm looking at my watch does not mean I'm in a rush. Maybe I just got a brand new watch that somebody gave me and I am admiring it. So you have to many times check it out. We'll get to that. The second key strategy is mood management. Your ability to manage your emotions. How do you manage anger? How do you manage anxiety? How do you manage disappointment? How do you create enthusiasm? How you manage anger is different than how you manage anxiety, which is different than how you create happiness, which is different than how you manage frustration, because all those emotions communicate different information. Now, in the handout, which I will walk you through, you will see specific strategies for those emotions. We are going to talk in generic strategies as a function of the amount of time that we have together. One of the important things about moods, very important, is they're like a social virus. They are literally contagious. Have you ever noticed that you're in the car with your partner, he or she starts raising their voice? Do you ever notice what happens to you? You start raising your voice? You know, I could be there with my ex-wife, and you'll understand why I use the word ex pretty soon as I tell you more stories. But, you know, sitting in the car, and she'd be on my case, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm doing good. I'm taking a deep breath. And then after a while, it's all right already. Look how you're acting. And then I become the villain. You are catching the other person's emotion. This happens in organizations. This is how anxiety starts to spread through. This is why, one of the things I've noticed, anger management is much more of a management supervisory skill. Anxiety management is much more of an executive skill, because being a leader, there's nothing in front of you. So you have to always go into the unknown. When executives can have anxiety problems, that is a big problem, because they're never decisive. And that spreads through in an organization. I want you to start to think, how do you pick up the emotions of another person? If I get a message from my editor on my machine and it says, Hank, please call immediately, I know whether that's good news or bad news. What am I responding to? Tone. Sound carries emotion. What does an angry voice sound like? What does a happy voice sound like? What does a sad voice sound like? So right away, as soon as a client calls, when your customer service people are trained in terms of identifying sounds, there was a huge article on the Wall Street Journal with this Israeli company now who is making a fortune creating devices that actually do that. Think of that. When a pilot calls, which pilot's voice sounds the most anxious? That's the person maybe who needs the most attention immediately. Very effective. So one of the ways we pick up emotions is through sound. You watch the same Seinfeld episode over and over and over. You laugh at the same thing over and over and over. Why? Oh, I can relate to it. Forget it. I can tell you a joke. You say, I've heard it before. It's not funny. There's a soundtrack in Seinfeld. A laugh track. That's why you were laughing. I once saw a Seinfeld episode without a laugh track. It's one of the dumbest shows I've ever seen. It's not funny. So sound carries emotion. Facial expressions. What does a happy face look like? What does a sad face? What is a bored face? One of the things is, again, a take action. I know it sounds hokey, but for your benefit, I get nothing extra. Stand in front of the mirror and talk about things that are important to you. And you will start to see facial expressions. I had a patient one time, she was getting married. I said, you don't really sound happy. Get in front of the mirror and talk about this guy. She called off the wedding. Seriously. This becomes a very powerful strategy. Now, the reason I point this out is, as a very quick tip, always anticipate the emotional state of those people you're going to encounter. Because then you can start to prepare for it. Just because your office partner is angry or anxious, why should you be anxious? If you were going to see your boss, I want you to think, is he going to be or she going to be good mood, bad mood? Because the responses are different. I'm meeting with my team. Are they going to be angry? Are they going to be anxious? I want to know what that emotion is before I encounter the person. Personal example, I would be driving down my household. Like if this was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I live in Connecticut, so I would be getting home. Let's say I'm leaving here like at 4. So say I'm walking to my house at 6 o'clock. As I'm going down the driveway, I see my house. I am thinking, what is the emotional state of my household? Because I want to know what I'm walking into. Well, my daughter Bree, 9th grade at the time, on an AOL chat line, taking a homework break. My son Danny, 3 years younger, 4 years younger, I forget, doing everything in his power to harass her. No doubt he's let our 2 giant dogs, a golden retriever, a black lab. The dogs are now running around, more chaos. My wife at the time was a nurse in a headache clinic, so she came home with a headache. So I'm thinking as I'm getting closer, my wife is flipping out, the kids are yelling and screaming, the dogs are running all around. This is why I back up out of the driveway immediately. I'd have to be insane to go into that house, but no crazier than you'd have to be to go into a meeting, conference room, a meeting with an individual without anticipating what the person's mood is. Third key is self-motivation. Now, if I were to say, how many people here are self-motivators? Everybody raises their hand. How do you know you're self-motivators? Well, I set my own goals, I exercise. Nobody has to tell me to do that, but I bet somebody has to tell you to clean out the garage. Self-motivation is not about getting up early and setting your own goals. Think like a psychologist. Self-motivation is how good are you at doing things you can't stand? How good are you at doing things you can't stand? I am a great self-motivator. I'm under a deadline. I don't like writing. I like the promoting, the talking, the thinking. But I know how to get myself to write books. That's what self-motivation is all about. And in everybody's job, there are things you don't like doing. That's why self-motivation is so important. Now notice these first 3. It's all about you. If you were driving home and you're stuck in traffic, you get angry, nobody's doing that to you. Nobody is deciding how self-motivated you can be. These first 3 are what I like to call intrapersonal emotional intelligence. It's all about you. The next 2 involve other people. Interpersonal expertise. How good are you at building consensus? How good are you at working out conflict? How come you work out conflict differently with your boss than you do with your kids? What are the rules that you are making? It's like expression of emotions. I would bet my life on it. I'd bet my life on it that every parent in this room has yelled at their kids who love you. Now, please tell me, why is it okay to yell at your kids who love you, but it's not okay to yell at your boss, who I guarantee does not love you? Okay? What are the rules that govern emotional expression? What are the rules at Chubb that govern emotional expression? With creative organizations, the trend is giving outlets for people to express their emotions. It used to be in corporate America that you can be enthusiastic, passionate before your time. Tom Peters wrote this book, In Search of Excellence, and he was saying passion, passion, passion. So every CEO will tell you it's okay to be passionate or enthusiastic, but they don't want you to be angry. Every time I'd see a couple and they'd come and they say, well, first thing we want to tell you is that we never get angry at each other. Okay, what's the next thing you want to tell me? That you're here because you have a sex problem? Oh yeah, how did you know? If you stifle one emotion, you are stifling the other. So interpersonal expertise are all the things you do with other people. Working out conflict, building consensus, team communication, criticism. Start to think of how well you give criticism. Start to think how well you take criticism. And we'll talk a little about that in a few minutes. And the fifth competency, which is the hardest, is emotional mentoring. And the reason emotional mentoring is the hardest is many times you have your own agenda. So if you are working for me and you're my right-hand person, and you've been with me for 15 years, and I know that I am successful because of you, and you tell me you got an offer from another job and you ask me what you should do, I'm going to say, you know what? They're not going to come through. You need to work here. Because I'm thinking of myself. It's like if you're my patient. Dr. Weisinger, I've seen you for the last 3 months, once a week, and my life is really great now, so I just wanted to say thank you very much. I won't be coming in anymore. Now, I look at my calendar and I say, my God, I only have 4 patients next week. I go back to that person and I say, you're not going anywhere. In fact, you need to come in 3 times a week. I am thinking of myself, not the other person. This is how parents create dysfunctional kids. The parent will say, you have to do this. You have to go into this situation. Johnny is top student worldwide. Any university in the world, full academic scholarship. He is also a phenomenal athlete. So he has both covered. He can go to any school on a football, basketball scholarship or any school on an academic scholarship. Comes home one day and says, Mom, Dad, I've decided I'm not ready for college. I need to develop my self-awareness. I'm going to Thailand for a year. And the parents flip out. What are you, crazy? Because they're thinking, how do I explain this to my friends? How do we explain this to your grandmother? This is like the mother saying to her 5-year-old who's having a little fit, if you don't get dressed, you're not going to go to that dance class, which the mother would never give up because that's how she sees her friends at the dance class. Forces the kid to do it. So all these taken together bring to life emotional intelligence. An example of emotional mentoring would be I come to you, you're my boss. I'm having a problem with Jack. Every time I talk to him, he interrupts me. He's abrasive to me. He doesn't respect me. Help me. Now, how can you help this person without giving them advice? I have found the major way that managers, executives help their staff is simply by giving them advice, which is nuts because they've already heard that advice 100 times. If your daughter or son comes home from school, they're having a problem with a friend, what other strategies can you use to help them without giving them advice? And role-playing would certainly be one option. Show me what Jack does, and I will show you how to interact with him or her. So these are the 5 competencies. If I am creating a new performance appraisal for an organization, this is all I want to look at. I don't need to see the other things. The other 10 attributes, I'm not saying they're not important, but it's more of the same. Now, how do we bring these factors to life? Let me give you some concrete strategies that you can start to do within the next 24 hours. The first, remember we talked about one of the dimensions of emotions is your thoughts. Learn to listen to how you talk to yourself. Do you ever pay attention to how you talk to yourself, especially when you're angry? I remember playing tennis with my nephew. This is years ago. He's 40 now, a hedge fund manager in Boston. So this is when when he was 16, so do the math, 24 years ago. We're playing tennis. He double faults on his first serve. He takes his racket, throws it into the net, and he walks around saying, I stink, I'm terrible. Now, true, my harassment had something to do with that. But nevertheless, his game just got worse. I would like everybody to spend 1 minute sitting in back and just listen to how you are talking to yourself. Do it. Okay, now start to process. How do your thoughts work? See, some of you will focus on the content, thinking about the things that you have to do, or you'll say, my thoughts are critical. What I want you to look at is that if your thoughts were in front of you, what would their attributes be? For example, do you speak to yourself quickly or slowly? Now, those who say slowly have an edge, because we speak really quick. If you're speaking quickly now and you're really not agitated, what do you think happens in the heat of the moment? Faster or slower? Everything speeds up. That is why the generic strategy for managing anger and anxiety is to slow yourself down. Sir, could you speak a little slower so I can gather the information so I can help you ASAP? If I say that to that angry person, believe me, I have just reduced their anger, which makes him or her easier for me to deal with. And also, when you get angry, you're thinking very irrationally. You distort things. That's why something happens on a Monday, you get upset. Tuesday is no big deal. Why? What's changed? You still got to pay the ticket. The report was still late. The event never, ever changes. What does change is how you think about it. That's why a good strategy when somebody is angry, like one of your staff members or colleague or your son or daughter, a good strategy is, you know what, think about it for a little bit, because it gives them time to physically calm down. Do you talk to yourself, would you say, in complete sentences or shorthand statements? And everybody's going to say shorthand statements, and that's a problem for all of us, because every shorthand statement really means something else. But you're talking so quickly, you don't say, is it true? For example, one of the shorthand statements that we all use at work is we say, blew it. Now, what does blew it really mean? See, if I walked off this stage and I said, I blew it, what does blew it really mean? Well, I'll stretch it out. I screwed up, I failed, lousy presentation, I'm never going to work with this company again, bad for my reputation, not going to make any more money, won't be able to pay my bills, everybody's going to leave me, what's the point of living? Now that happens, no. What I want you to realize, that happens in about a second. During the Madoff scandal, remember a guy in Sweden lost $1 billion? Anybody remember what he did? Threw himself in front of a train. They used that in Wall Street too. A takeoff on that. Now, what do you think he was saying to himself? You can't even imagine. There is not one person in this room who can imagine what would you have to say to yourself to make you jump in front of a train. Now you can understand how gloomy depression is. You can't relate to a clinically depressed person. And start to think, what do you think your clients are saying when they have had a disaster? If you want to relate more effectively to other people, a very good strategy is that when they tell you something, think of a similar situation. It doesn't have to be the same. If your kids did poorly in a test, you think of when you did poorly in a presentation. And instead of saying, you should have studied harder, you'll say things like, yeah, that's a lousy feeling. And you'll start to be much more empathic. So I want you, and please don't say you don't have time, 5 minutes a day to sit back and listen to how you talk to yourself. And you know what many of you are going to find? How you talk to yourself doesn't help. Makes the situation worse. Some of you are going to find that every time you have to give a presentation, you're talking negatively to yourself. You're undermining your own level of confidence. Some of you are going to find that every time you have to work with a particular person, you are talking negatively to yourself. For some of you, your thoughts will help you. Who has a better day? The guy who wakes up in the morning and says, oh man, the economy sucks. It's a jungle out there. I'm going to lose business. What's the point of going to work? Or the person who wakes up, I don't care how the economy is. I don't care what's out there. I'm going to have a great day. We all know the difference. So I want you to get practice listening to how you're talking to yourself. And the domestic example, shorthand statement that I know you've all said if you're in a relationship, you get into an argument with your partner, you say, that's it. What the hell does that mean? That's it. That's it. I went out, divorce, alimony, what's going to happen to the kids, what the neighbor's going to think, all in a microsecond. When I would get into arguments with my wife and she'd say, that's it, I'd say, okay, that's it. I'm going to go watch the Yankee game. But I realized that's it. I don't even know what it meant. Now, once you are aware of how you can talk to yourself, you can use the second strategy. Use your thoughts as instructional self-statements. Use your thoughts as instructional self-statements. Follow up to my nephew. 6 weeks after that tennis incident, I'm back in Michigan. Now, this time we go bowling. We're in the 7th frame. I look at the score. I say, my God, my nephew's up 30 pins. I got to get back into this match. But then I got a hold of myself, so I'm listening to myself. And I hear myself saying, Hank, what are you doing? Do you always have to compete with your nephew? Do you have to make everything a win-lose situation? Is that the type of relationship you want? And I will tell all of you that I felt very proud of myself that I inhibited such a juvenile, adolescent need. You don't have to win. All I said to him was, Derek, you're up 30 points. Don't choke. I am trying to be supportive, encouraging. He hangs on, he wins decisively, and as we're walking out, he says to me, when you told me not to choke, I knew you were